Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's presentation. Today, we have Daniela Williams from Paylient, and she is the Chief Growth Officer. Paylient is a professional employer organization, which is a PEO, and they serve specifically the cannabis industry. And they do something very unique. I'm really excited about this presentation because they partner with the dispensaries and the cultivators to provide tailored HR solutions to support the growth and ensure compliance in one of the most highly regulated industries, which I can't wait for her to explain what that means and what the partnership means. It's more of a shared liability model, which is clutch in this industry. If any of you guys have worked with other payroll service providers, we know that there's a lot of mistakes that happen and a lot of issues that happen, and the payroll service provider kind of puts that onto the business owner to handle, which becomes a huge problem. So I'm excited to have Daniela, and she will go through how her organization can work with some of your clients. So, Daniela.
Yes, thank you so much. So happy to be here. And to your point, that was a wonderful intro. You stole half my presentation in the best way possible, so I love it. So yeah, what are we going to talk about today? Majority of the audience today, my understanding, are CPAs, and you have a lot, right, going on all the time. You're pulled in 1,000 directions, whether it's to do something helpful, to fix a problem, but your clients are relying on you for things within your realm and things without. They just expect you to be kind of like the end all be all. And so how can we help make your job easier and protect your clients at the same time? So we're going to talk about the power of a PEO partnership today with Paylient. And specifically, of course, how does that impact you? And then, of course, your client. Sarah, you can go to the next slide. So I already got such a wonderful introduction. We have a QR code here. If you want any of my contact information, you can go ahead and scan it now. It will also be at the end of the presentation, and Naomi has it, so you can get it from lots of places. So let's jump in. So we have a very long agenda today. Naomi did such a wonderful job putting out some great bullet points on the value of the presentation. So you have your agenda there. I'm not going to read everything on the screen, as I know you can read it. But within that agenda, what are we going to cover and why is it valuable to you? So you can take a glance, but overall, we're going to talk about what is a PEO, how they're different, what does Paylient do specifically for your clients, how that impacts and provides value to you, and then of course go over any questions that you might have. So as we all know, and I'm not telling you anything you don't, cannabis is one of the fastest growing industries in the US. Unfortunately, from what I found being in it, the HR and compliance part of that is not growing as quickly. It's still holding a lot of businesses back. And so what can we do to help this industry to continue to professionalize, which is really what sets Paylient apart and why we entered into this space. So let's get into the nitty gritty a little bit. So what are the challenges? So I have seen a lot of crazy things in my time in human capital management. None of them are industry specific. They're all very similar problems until cannabis. And with cannabis, what I found is that folks are so focused on all of the red tape and all of the operational compliance that there's a little bit of a gap in understanding all of the challenges and requirements that come once you have a W-2 employee. I think the main issue is there's still some misunderstanding that because it's not federally legal, that maybe these companies don't have to comply with labor laws today, but they do, especially for those who are practicing in states where it is medically or recreationally legal. You have to comply with the labor laws. And so I'm sure you've had these conversations with your clients. I have had them. Everything. Okay.
I'm sorry. Are you guys able to hear us? MC is or LC Miller saying no audio. Please let us know in the chat if you guys can hear us. Can you? Oh no, if you can't. Okay. So maybe LC jump out and jump back in. Okay, it looks like you guys can. Sorry about that. That would be a tragedy.
Okay, good. Oh, I love it. Okay, wonderful. Thank you. I'm so happy about that. And thank you for staying on top of the comments. So what I have found is to that point, right? They're not necessarily, it's not resonating. And so I've found a lot that there are some legacy folks who are very into understanding the compliance culture in California. And then there's some who are super against it. And then we have people who are coming into cannabis now, and it's a very mixed bag. But some of the biggest challenges that you have probably seen as well, I have, is that every single state has its own rules, sometimes down to the county. For example, in California, PTO varies based on all the different counties, and there's a ton of them. The employee life cycle, I've had so many potential clients and clients not even know what that means. And really from the time they put out a job description until they are having any sort of separation, and all those different pieces within that are not being managed. I've had folks who just put someone's girlfriend in the role because she's nice, or someone's aunt, or someone's friend. And there's just not really a lot of true deep understanding of what does HR really mean and how does it truly impact the business, because it does, right? There's a lot of failures here to comply with labor laws and compliance requirements. There's a lot of unbudgeted expenses going on because people are getting fined or they're getting sued. There are, to Naomi's point, so many payroll errors that are not only costing extra dollars in time that you have to fix, but also in penalties. Traditional vendors aren't being in this space, right? And so we've seen some, I would say, quality vendors jump in who have a long history of providing these services. And then we have a bunch of players who kind of just jumped in to try to get rich quick or to come fill a gap, and they don't have the history of offering services like this. And then it gets your clients into even more hot water. And then, of course, what does that mean? You clean up the mess. So why are we created? What is a PEO? What is shared liability? Let's get into that piece. So what's a PEO? And I'm sure many of you know, and some might not be as familiar. So if some of this is repetitive or redundant in terms of your education, I apologize. But a PEO truly is a professional employer organization, and it's a shared liability, which we'll get into more, that is a true partnership. So it allows the client to focus on running the business, managing the employees, and dealing with clients and revenue, whereas the PEO will come in and truly be the area of expertise for HR, compliance, payroll, workers' comp, and benefits, and technology. So instead of necessarily having to have a huge team of internal resources to manage all these different areas, or making sure that you don't know, let's say maybe some people hire folks, but they don't know how to make sure that they're truly an expert. They don't know how to make sure that their credentials are up to date and accurate. They don't know how to make sure that their HR person can handle managing the employees and staying up to date on all these things. So it gives the expertise and the knowledge and the protection, and it's basically a huge insurance policy. And how does that kind of get administered? Let's talk through it. So first and foremost, what is shared liability? Shared liability, truly in the most simplest term, means that we are in this with you. There's true skin in the game. We are at the same level of requirements to maintain compliance for your clients. If your clients get sued, we get sued. That is the biggest differentiator between a typical vendor and us. We'll get into some pieces of rules in a little bit in terms of law examples, but I know one thing that I shared with Naomi a while back is if you have a regular vendor, and I'm not saying they're good, bad, or indifferent, it's just a different option, but you have Augusto or you have any other payroll provider, it doesn't matter if it's Kaya Push, it doesn't matter if it's Greenleaf, it doesn't matter who it is, their job is to process what you tell them to process as a client, right? You give them the payroll, their job is to process it. Their job is not to proactively make sure that what is being sent over to be processed is compliant. And there's one example I'm going to share just to kind of explain the difference. So if you go to a payroll vendor, like I said, you give them your payroll, you tell them your frequency, they set it up for you, and you're done. I've had so many dispensaries, as an example, in New York come to me from other vendors. And first thing I notice when we're doing things with them is that they're out of violation of an employer law. So in New York, as an example, a dispensary is classified under a retail location. And in New York, you have to pay retail employees weekly. So there are just tons of dispensaries operating in violation of a labor law every single day. And every day they continue to do that is more and more and more and more potential fines, potential liability that your employees find out, and now you're in a lawsuit. So
yeah. Let me just jump in right here. Just type a 1 in the chat if you've ever had a payroll issue at your client and they come to you as the accountant to try to resolve that rather than using the payroll service provider. And then on top of that, you as the accountant may step in and then try to work with the payroll service provider and realize that they take no liability. They say, oh, well, I guess we messed up. And it's just a big nightmare. Like, no, type a 1 in the chat if you've ever had a payroll issue, because I've had 100% of my clients have had a payroll issue, and it's either a missed overtime pay, either a missed holiday pay, either an incorrect pay out when the some states require that if somebody is fired or they leave, their final pay has to happen that day or within 24 hours of that, not the next payroll cycle. And there's just so many different rules that happen. And if you were a nerd like me and started reading into some of the court cases, you see a lot of payroll related employee law related court cases where it's 100% the client's issue that they have to deal with. So this shared liability is brand new to me. I'm not sure if you guys have heard. Let us know if you've heard of this before, but yeah, this really excites me.
Yes. Oh, thank you so much. So, and that's the biggest piece, right? Because the shared liability protects the client, and that's what we're all after. It's making sure that everything that they do is done to insulate them from risk, and they're just not left there on their own. Oh, yeah, I know. A lot of people don't know about the weekly thing, and it's not just New York. There's actually a large handful of states, and we'll talk through that in a little bit. So let's go to the next slide. So the common misconception, and I'm gonna go on a limb and say there's someone in the audience right now saying that they don't like PEOs because it's a loss of control for their client, or they don't give great service. And you're right, that does happen. And so I like to start off with this because I understand what some of the objections are. I've heard them. I worked for a PEO, my first PEO job a very long time ago. They don't play in cannabis, so I'm okay with saying this. And it ultimately got to a point where they didn't provide service and they didn't, stay accountable for issues. And this is why I'm so passionate about Paylient and making sure that cannabis businesses have a place to turn. So let's go to talk about how they're not created equal. So there's a few different categories that are so important for your clients and for you when doing your due diligence, because no service provider is created equal. You can hire someone and they follow against everything that they stood for in their interview. You could hire a vendor and they could be someone you think is great and they're not, or they're maybe not at the level in which you hoped. And then others could be wonderful. So there's certain areas that we need to talk about to really understand what are those differentiators. So customization. Nothing should be a one size fits all. If the PO is trying to get your client to fit in their box, automatically probably not a good fit. Everything should be about doing what's right for the client. So, a lot of POs have potential limits on the number of employees, or they have required minimums. They don't allow a client to utilize workers' comp or benefits outside of their service. Then they don't have a dedicated HR person. Those are huge, right? Because you should be allowed to have access to this service, whether you have one employee or 100,000 employees. You should be allowed to use your workers' comp broker if you want to, or your benefits broker if you want to. And you should have a dedicated HR person. If you're calling an 800 number or being transferred out of the US, you're never going to get great service. So these are things you have to understand and ask about. And level of control, as we talked about, it's probably the number one most asked question I've gotten. I've been in human capital management, specifically PEO, for about 22 years at this point. It's the level of control. They're not all the same. So again, I'm going to use an example for someone who's not in cannabis. Insperity. I don't know if any of you have ever worked with them. They have a different level of control. So they have actual individual employee contracts, with every single employee of their client companies. The I-9s have Insperity on them. Their benefit booklets have their logo. They don't have access to all the reports and information about their own company. They don't guide with labor laws. They require you do them or you're off their service. Infinity and Paylient, which we'll talk about where Infinity falls in this later, but we're so different in that way. So I-9s are going to say your client's name. Benefit books are going to have your client's logo. They have access to every single piece of data possible. We don't just require them to do something, we guide them. And at the end of the day, it's their decision to make for their business. Service excellence, another huge key area. We don't do call centers. We don't offshore anything. We have service level agreements that require our dedicated representatives to respond to your clients within 2 hours, sometimes an hour or less, which is very different than you usually get with the service provider. We have a very small client to representative ratio. So at an Insperity, for example, or an ADP where I first started out, they have 85 clients to manage. That is near impossible, which is why it takes about 4 hours on hold for your customer service line. We don't. We have maybe 20, and that depends on, employee count. Transparency. Billing is probably another thing you've dealt with. One of my biggest issues with any POs that do bundled billing is that you and your clients should be able to know every single thing that you're paying for. It should be line item out. It should be unbundled. It should be very clear. They should be capping taxes. There are some that don't, which is incredibly disgusting to me because you shouldn't be making money on an area that you shouldn't be making money. So tax capping is huge for us. And there's no nickel and diming. So at an ADP, for example, if you want a GL interface, on top of the admin you're paying, it's another $125. We don't do that. GL interface and customized reporting, everything is all included, especially when we give our CPAs of our clients access. We want you to have direct access into the reports so you can go and run and pull and get invoices and do whatever you need. We can do dedicated job costing, whatever we can to make sure that we are making your life easier. And then expertise. So we're built for cannabis. We got into cannabis. Our parent company is Infinity. They handle everything non-cannabis related. And then Paylient's the sister company. And we did this for obvious banking reasons, but also because cannabis is special, right? And so we wanted to have an entire section dedicated to just supporting cannabis, but we've been doing PEO and human capital management for 28 years. So the years in service are so critical because it's important. It is something that you have to do so much due diligence to make sure your client are partnering with the right folks and that you have the credential of expertise. So Paylient, we've mentioned the name, but Paylient has nothing but passion around it. We got into cannabis for actual personal reasons with the plant, both myself with my father, our CEO and his wife, and our head of risk and his wife. And so for a long time where our head of risk was living, it was illegal and there was no access to the plant. And so he had to do some, creative ways to get his wife what she needed to get taken care of. And he vowed from that moment that everyone needs access. And we were going to create a PEO from Infinity to make sure that every single business owner has access to everything that every other industry has access to. And so does the employees. At this point, in any other industry, it's so standard to have access to benefits and 401k, an HR team, training if you need it. And it's so difficult for these companies to get that. And so that's why we're here. We want to make sure that this industry continues to professionalize and grow and are met with the access to all of the same rights that everyone else gets access to. And so we'll talk about that and how we do that now. I wanted you to see our core values. I think this is important because everything that we do truly is with our clients at the center. We are the most customer-centric organization I've probably ever been a part of or even honestly had any interaction with. It's all about the customer. We need to think like the customer. We're in this together. We make sure our employees own their development. We want to proactively think, what could our clients need and handle it, do it proactively, make sure we have honest conversations and always do what we say. And I won't spend too much time here because it's not just all about us, it's about how do we help you. So let's dive into that a little bit more. So from a high level services overview, we cover everything in the entire employee life cycle. So literally from the time they put out a job description, we're going to make sure it complies with the Americans with Disabilities Act. While they're going through the applicant tracking process, that's going to be linked into their HR system. all the way, you'll see there's HR and compliance, payroll and tax administration, benefits, workers' comp, risk and safety, employee relations, onboarding and termination support, time and labor solutions, which also come with a scheduler, recruiting services, custom benefit models, an actual HR system white labeled, and then a 401k offering. And we're going to get into how we do that in a little bit more detail. So the first thing is our HR system. So we are going to customize this and make it be as efficient as need be for you and for your client. So there's some bullet points on here. I don't want you to feel like you're getting a dissertation by any means. So I'm going to let you review some of those bullet points. But the whole piece of it is designed from hiring. So they would have streamlined, effective, and compliant onboarding. So as an example, in California, when you have an onboarding of a new client, you have to give them 15 different pieces of documentation that they have to sign off that they received. In other states, it could be one or it could be three. And so based on the county and the state that the company and the employee is in, we automate that process for them. So there's literally not 1 ounce of their business that is not insulated from a potential issue. This is going to include, I already mentioned applicant tracking, but most importantly, this is where we can set up custom reports that you may need access to help this business. Everything is pay as you go. So whether they're doing workers' comp with us, pay as you go. The HR cost, pay as you go. So you can really understand, what is this going to cost my client? How do we budget accordingly? If there's no questions, I'll just skip. But if there is a question, you can wait till the end, or please throw it in the comments and I'm sure Naomi will grab it for me. So with every area that we kind of handle, I wanted to give you some nuggets of information. I know Angela already mentioned she didn't know about the paying weekly. So if nothing else, you can take away some of these tidbits if these are states you're in. But this is a good did you know. So in Oregon, for example, you must provide your employee with a written wage agreement at time of hire. I've now worked with about 2 to 3 people in Oregon, and they had no idea this was a requirement. It was the first they ever heard of it. In California, wage statement violations are the #1 cannabis labor lawsuit. And in Connecticut, you must track daily hours worked even for salaried staff. That is so uncommon. That's typically only for hourly, as you know. And it's these nuances that are very difficult to figure out and manage for your clients. And even for us, right? We have a whole legal team, a whole HR team dedicated to just staying on top of this. So let's go to the next area that we partner, payroll support. So again, if you want to make sure there's no errors, Payroll and Paylient are the 2 keys that you need in your back pocket. So from a payroll support perspective, it's going to be all inclusive. They get a dedicated payroll processor. What does that mean? When your clients come on board, their payroll person is going to do a full audit of their payroll. They're going to check and make sure everyone's classified correctly, that 1099s are properly 1099s versus W-2, that they're doing the right payroll frequency based on their state. They're going to make sure that everyone's coded properly and that everything is right before we even get to processing their first payroll. And then we tell them how it isn't and how do we change it, and then help them do those changes. If they are adamant and like, nope, we're going to leave it, because some people are just not ever changing their 1099 to a W-2, then we just at least let them know what that liability looks like and then move forward. But everything under payroll is going to be all inclusive. So you have your audit. Then you have the same person who's going to process this for you. So you're not just sending it to a random place. You send it to your dedicated person. They know after a little bit of time working with you, they're going to know what every employee is making. If they see an extra zero somewhere, they're going to stop it and make sure it gets corrected. They're going to give you the opportunity to have one last glance. And then their job is to keep the company compliant. So everything that falls under the payroll umbrella, department, DOL, wage and hour, ICE, all of those things, every time a law changes that impacts your client down to the county level, they're going to reach out, let them know what the law is, how it has changed, who it's affected, and what are their options to make sure they're compliant. So this is a true partnership. We're going to help them with all of the things that they haven't had access to previously. And whether they're single state or multi-state, we're going to make sure that all of their tax compliant and wage calculation is always accurate.
I'm gonna just jump in.
Yes.
The labor law changing too is also important because I've had an example with the minimum wage changing and the payroll service provider not adjusting. And so my client wasn't even paying the required minimum wage, which is a huge, issue.
Yes. And that unfortunately happens all the time because the ownership of responsibility is on the client, not on the service provider. And yes, service providers should be doing more, but they know that ultimately they're not liable. So they don't have to, which is what's scary because I can tell you the government doesn't stand here and say, here's every law that's changing. Here's your book of compliance. They're just not, because they want their money too. And they get that with all these violations and all these other issues. So, moving from the payroll, let's go to the next area. Did you know? So we love the did you knows. So we have a whole series also of compliance did you knows that we can provide you so that you can learn all this stuff as well or not have to memorize it. But in Ohio, same thing like New York, they have to be paid weekly. This is for retail classification for dispensaries. So now you know it's New York and now you know it's Ohio. So one thing to look out for right away with your clients. In Alaska, overtime must be paid after 8 hours in a day, not just 40 in a week. And that also varies by state, which obviously you all probably know. They all have these different rules. And then New Mexico, I thought this is also important to know. State law requires employers to track and report unused paid sick leave hours on pay stubs. Not a lot of companies are putting their unused sick time or PTO on their pay stubs. And most payroll companies aren't set up to automatically do that or even track PTO or unused sick time. So these are really critical did you knows that can truly help protect your client. So let's go to the next area is HR management. This is probably the second in I'd say in conjunction with payroll, the most important pieces for your clients is HR. Again, people really understanding what does this mean and how many different areas and buckets within my business does this touch. And so again, I'm finding a lot of folks in cannabis kind of putting people in HR. I have a client right now that have about 150 employees. They've been in business a very long time. They put the CFO's girlfriend in charge of HR, and they're in 3 active lawsuits as we speak. And now they're looking at us. And it's like, how do we avoid this? Because those alone could shut down their business. I mean, we are in such an industry of small margins right now that any of these little things can really honestly make them lose their business. So how do we help them? We need to continue to educate and remind everyone the importance of HR. So there's 2 components, right? There's tactical, more administrative, and then there's strategic. Your clients will get a dedicated HR person. They can have no HR and we will fully become their HR, or they can have HR in place, but let those folks focus on the employees and revenue generating pieces instead of trying to stay up to date on all the laws, which I can tell you right now, if your clients have HR in house, there's no way someone has the bandwidth to stay up to date on every single labor law and compliance change or law and do all the day-to-day of employee management, especially in cannabis, because there are lots of employee issues, as I'm sure you all know. So how do we help them? Same theory as payroll. They come on board and we do a full HR audit. We find out what they have and what they don't, what they want to have versus what they don't, because not everyone that we work with wants the same things. Some are adamant they don't want a handbook, regardless how much we tell them it's important to have one. And so they don't have to, but we want them to know what they have access to. And so from a tactical support perspective, and there's obviously more, but just some of the big ones I put up here for you is compliance with Americans with Disabilities Act. It would be shocking to most of you to find out there's actually full-time jobs for people who sit online and all they do is look for job descriptions that don't meet this so that they can file a discrimination lawsuit, even if they had no intention of ever working at that company. It's wild. Job classification reviews, because it has to meet multiple standards, handbooks, addendums, policy development. And what's great is within the HR function, linking to our HR system, it sends the handbooks and addendums and all that out to the employees and then keeps track of who signed it with a time and date stamp. So that's another level of protection. Then you have onboarding and offboarding support. And what's very important about that, and actually, Naomi, you touched on it, and I might have an example built, but the offboarding is critical, right? Because to Naomi's point, every state is different. In some states, you have to give them their payroll, their last check the day that you're terminating. Some has to be done before the next pay period. Some you have 14 days. Some you have 3 business days. It is exhausting to stay on top of it. So it's so critical that you have those pieces. There's required local, state, and federal training. In most states, there's some sort of component now. It does usually based on employee size, but you have to have discrimination training and sexual harassment. It's there. Some states it's 5 employees, some it's 1, some it's 50, but it's there. Employee certification tracking, right? You need a place to track all this. And then strategically, you need to avoid risk. If you're conducting or your clients are conducting their own employee investigations, that employee can come back and say, well, that's Naomi got let go because they liked me better. They're going to take my side, or vice versa. It can always come back to favoritism or some sort of discrimination. So having a third party navigate that for you reduces that. It also makes sure that as you're navigating any complaints from these employees, it's going to be done right and well. And then we bring the executive team or whoever is dedicated as our liaison, the findings, and then all of the things that they can do to negate any issues from happening in the future and making sure the employees are taken care of and disciplined how they need to be. We do conflict resolution, leadership development, termination assistance, employment, obviously with cannabis specific laws, and so much more. But the point is you are fully supported and do not have to worry about these things being an issue. Then we have another piece of our service that is going to be more on something that you can choose if you want to include or not. Sarah, can you go to the next slide for me? Oh, sorry. Actually, let me not jump ahead of myself. The did you knows. So critical here. Jersey, all businesses, even small ones, are required to provide earned sick leave. That has not been something any one of my business owner in Jersey has known until I tell them, because it's so hard to find this law. But that also costs money, and they have no idea how much, how you track it. And so we handle that. In Alaska, you have to report new hires within 20 days to the Alaska Department of Labor. That is a very big one-off. Most states don't require that you report new hires to the Department of Labor, but they do, and it has to be within 20 days. That's wild. In West Virginia, terminated employees must be paid within 72 hours. So another example. So now let's go into the next area of service. So benefits administration. I'm sure all of you have seen by now, it's not easy for companies to get access to benefits in cannabis. And if they do find a broker or a carrier that will work with them, there's 2 big bumps you have to go over. 1, you have to meet participation requirements. In most cases, it's 50% of participation. Sometimes it's 75%, depending on the carrier. It is so difficult for a client to meet that. So what happens? No one gets them because they can't get half their employees to sign up. And if they can get people to sign up, the other issue is that, again, their margins are so low that maybe right now they don't have the money to contribute to those benefits. And so you have to contribute once you offer benefits, especially on open market through carriers. You have to contribute 50% of the lowest premium offered. That's a lot of money. And so what do we do differently? We have access to benefits that require no contribution from the company and no participation requirements from the employees. It is one of the only opportunities for folks to be able to offer group insurance to their employees and be able to separate themselves from a retention and an attraction standpoint to give these people access. It also includes access to 401k programs. We will have a dedicated benefits person, again, as a part of their Paylient team. Oh, yay, thank you. As a part of their Paylient team who will handle everything. They'll go through all the plans. They'll help them make sure if they do want to contribute, they can, of course. They'll do benefit books. They'll conduct benefit meetings. They'll make sure the employees are signed up. We can do this on the phone, computer, whatever they need, also bilingual if needed. They'll make sure that they can help find specialists. And it's all with minimal year over year increases. So it's a huge differentiator and something that we're very proud to help support the cannabis space. So let's get into the what did you knows. Oregon, if you offer any benefits like PTO or health insurance, you must provide written notice of the benefit at hire. So you can't tell them later. You have to have all of it ready to go in writing. Connecticut, mini COBRA applies to employees with under 20 employees. So if you're an employer and you offer benefits and you have less than 20, you still have to offer COBRA once and if they're no longer with you. In California, if you have 5 or more employees, you are required to provide up to 12 weeks of leave under the California Family Rights Act, even if you're not offering FMLA. So again, these are huge pieces that you have to know about.
Wait, Californians get 3 months of leave?
Yes.
Or what? I did not know that.
12 weeks. Yes.
Oh,
yes.
up to. Okay.
Up to, but they get it. Now the up to only means if they don't take all those 12 weeks. But I can tell you, my sister-in-law in California just had a baby, and she got all of that. My brother got all of that, and then they also get state disability on top of it.
Nice.
Yeah. I mean, good for the employee, not as great for the employer. So, it's a scale of balance, but yeah. So let's go into the next. So workers' comp and risk and safety. Again, they don't have to do this with us, but here's the benefit. On the open market, you go to your broker, you have to have a deposit. You have to pay monthly estimated rates for your payroll amounts. And then you have I'm sorry, I just said the wrong word. You have a upfront deposit, you have your monthly estimated amounts, and then you have an audit at the end of the year. We don't do that. It's pay as you go. No deposit, no audit. You only pay for hours that are actually on your payroll. You have full OSHA compliance support. All of the safety trainings and risk assessments will handle all workers' comp claims, all reporting, all modified duty. We'll make sure that the employers understand what are their rights, because a lot of people think if your employee files a claim, they just get to sit at home and do nothing, but that's not the case, right? So if it's real, of course, let's nurse them back to health. Let's get them taken care of. In places like Florida, Texas, California, and now, unfortunately, some more states where it's more often a fraudulent workers' comp claim, most people think you have to pay this employee for their full 40 hours and then sit at home, and that's not the case. So, for example, in California, you only have to pay 20 hours at their rate, and you can have them do any job. You can have them sit. I've had a client have someone sit in a lunchroom and just say hi to people who are eating lunch. They get their 20 hours. And let me tell you, when they realize that you're not going to allow them to take advantage of you as an employer, they all of a sudden are ready to come back to work, or they want to quit. So you have to know how to navigate all these different pieces to lower your expenses, because the more someone is out and the more you're paying, the more it increases your loss ratio, which is the amount of money you're paying to the carriers and the amount they're paying out in claims. And once that gets off balance, then your costs for your clients will go through the roof. So how do we eliminate increased workers' comp dollars? And this is how you do it. You have a partner that protects you in these areas. So let's go. You can go to the what did you know or what didn't you know? Montana, all workplace injuries must be reported to the state, even if no claim is filed. That is huge, because most people think unless there's a claim, why do you need to report it? But you do. In Maine, it requires all employers, even with one employee, to carry workers' comp, whereas most states it's 5 or 15, depending. In Washington, the Department of Labor and Industries requires cannabis employers to have a written workplace safety plan. I can tell you most of my clients don't. In some states they don't have to, some states they do, but this is a very important one to know. So let's go to the next slide and make sure that we understand, why does this matter for your clients? Your job, as well as mine, is to protect them and to be someone they can go to for advice, and make sure that you are a trusted advisor. This will help reduce their risk, make sure that they're not getting any unbudgeted expenses. They can have predictable labor costs, better employee experience with reduced turnover, dedicated experts handling these things so they can just focus on their license, their clients, and their growing. But now what's most important is, what does this mean for you, right, as their CPA? So let's talk through that as well. Sarah, thank you. Audit-ready reports at your fingertips, direct access to payroll and HR data, custom reports for job costing and reconciliation, much fewer emergencies all around, but specific to payroll and compliance, and the ability for you to continue to focus on high-value advisory work and not just fixing all of these payroll administrative issues. This is a quote. You can read it or I'll just read it. But basically, this retail operator, they're an MSO, and they said partnering with Paylient gave us confidence. Payroll errors disappeared. Audits became less scary. And our CPA finally had the reports they needed that they didn't have to chase us down for, which hopefully is music to y'all's ears. So at Paylient, we help cannabis businesses and their accountants focus on growth and not HR headaches. And there's some stats down there that you can read. We do have a bunch of resources. Naomi already has some of them, but we have them for free. If you need anything, if you want anything, we have compliance checklists for every single state, whether they're medicinal or recreational or both. We have a bunch of white papers, articles, blogs, lots of information that we can provide to any of you. And then, of course, I want to open it for any questions.
Awesome. That was excellent. That was a fire hose, a lot of information.
So much information. So much.
If you guys have any questions about your state or your clients, please let us know.
And then, Sarah, if you'll throw the next slide on so that if anyone wants to grab my contact information, it's there on the screen, or of course you can use the QR code. But would love to hear from you. Would love to be able to just be another resource for you in any way.
Okay, awesome. Well, it doesn't look like there are any questions. So,
Okay.
well, thank you so much. Oh, wait. Okay, they're coming in. Oh, wait. Anything interesting from Massachusetts? Do you have any did you knows from the state of Massachusetts?
Yes, actually, do you want to drop your email into the comments? I'll grab it and I can email you over an entire sheet on Massachusetts. There's about 8 to 10 very important did you knows.
Okay. This is great information. Do you handle unemployment filings? Oh, I can put it up here.
Yes, that's actually
my client had someone abandon their job and now filing for unemployment.
Yes. So one part of our service under the payroll umbrella is going to be wage garnishments and unemployment filings. So we will handle unemployment. The client can tell us if they want to pay or if they don't. If they don't, we will fight it and we can actually go to the hearing on their behalf so they don't have to.
Nice. So they don't, that's nice because typically you have to pay an attorney to go to things like that.
Yes, and that will be included in our service. Sarah, can you do me a favor and just grab all of the emails if you can for me and any states that they're looking for, and then we will make sure to get that over to you.
Okay, perfect.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. I think Tanika wants Maryland.
I was going to just ask that. Thank you. Okay.
And all right.
Perfect.
Okay, cool.
Wonderful.
Doesn't look like there's any other questions. So thank you so much for this presentation.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, awesome. And bye, everyone. I'll see you guys in the next one.
See ya.